Hello, good to have you join us on the program. I am Omini Odan. In the past 4 years, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency and the Nigerian Agency gives predictions on the annual flood outlook in Nigeria every year. The latest is the current mass flooding forecast that will sweep across many states in Nigeria. The report shows that some parts of 102 local government areas in 28 states fall within the highly probable flood risk areas, and parts of 275 local government areas in the 36 states of the Federation, including the FCT, fall within the moderately probable flood areas. Again, the states that are contiguous to rivers Niger and Benue, namely Kebbi, Niger, Kwara, Adamawa, Kogi, Anambra, Delta, Edo, Rivers and Bayelsa are likely to be affected much by river flooding. Already, so many states like Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara are already experiencing high devastating flooding. The burning issue today is how the citizenry can be made to buy into professional advice, along with governments to open drainages, build drainage paths, remove structures that are within floodplains, adopt continuous clearing of waterways, including coordinated dams and reservoir operations, among others. The agencies had gone a step further to introduce the newly launched Flood Mobile application to enable individuals, stakeholders to monitor daily flood situation anywhere and wherever they are in Nigeria. Already, billions of property, economies, farmlands, and many lives have been lost, with the bleak future that was may be experienced before the year comes to an end. Our searchlight on Tuesday Live tonight will focus on the best way to confront the situation and how to cushion the impact. Is public education failing? Are public enlightenment tools not effectively deployed? As usual, with NTA Tuesday Live, we'll bring to you reports across the Federation. But first, let's begin with this background report by Onengie Fineface.
This 800,000 hectares of rice farm, cultivated by more than 70,000 farmers in Kebbi State, is submerged in flood water.
I lost 2 major rice fields. My big farm, 100 hectares farm, is, as we speak, underwater.
A similar fate is facing farmers in Sokoto, Niger, and some other states in the north, while lives have been lost and property worth millions of naira destroyed in the Federal Capital Territory FCT, Adamawa, and Borno states. But the worst is yet to come. NIMET's 2020 seasonal rainfall prediction indicates that Nigeria has many more days of rainfall in the course of the year in the months of September and October. This means more urban and flash flooding is to be expected. The Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, NESA, is predicting river flooding as a result of excess flow from rivers Niger and Benue. Already, some countries upstream the Niger Basin, including Niger, Benin, Burkina Faso, and parts of Mali, have been flooded. The hydrological stations in Niger Republic and Benin Republic have got into the red alert zone. Dams upstream the Niger and Benue rivers are already impounding water. In the case of release, especially from the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon, the consequence for Nigeria will be devastating. Consequently, states on the bank of the rivers Niger and Benue are to prepare for river flooding. They include Kebbi, Niger, Kwara, Nasarawa, Kogi, Anambra, Delta, Edo, Rivers, and Bayelsa. NESA is also recommending clearance of waterways, drainages, water channels, floodplains, and flood paths to reduce impact of the floods. Onengie Fineface, NTA News.
2020 flood alert is the focus of Tuesday Live tonight, and Onengie's Fineface Background report sets the tone for the takeoff of the program. It's Tuesday Live. At some point in the course of the program, our phone lines will be open, and if we're told to you, please make your contributions and go straight to the point. Please, in doing this, turn down the volume of your television set. You could also be part of the conversation tonight through our Twitter handle at Tuesday Live NTA to sustain the conversation on flooding alerts, what mitigation efforts in Nigeria. Tonight we'll be doing Kebbi and Abuja, but for now the Kebbi State Governor who is joining us is not ready. We are not seeing through our signals. I have tonight with me on set Director General, Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, Nze Clement. Good to have you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Also, Professor Sani Abubakar Mashi, Director General, CEO, Nigerian Meteorological Agency. He is also Nigeria's permanent representative and member of Executive Council to the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. Good to have you on the program.
Happy to be with you.
Also, in the course of the program, we shall be joined by Professor Hilary Inyang. He's been expected to be part of the program tonight. Well, gentlemen, while we wait to go to Kebbi for an update on developments there, because there have been worse hits recently, Kebbi, Sokoto, and a few other states from the northern part of this country. Let's begin here. DG Hydrological Services Agencies, let's begin with you. What's the update generally?
Thank you for having me today. Earlier in the year, precisely around May, in May precisely, the agency went on air by making a release of the flood forecast for the year, the prediction. The Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adam, did the public presentation. And in that presentation, it was quite clear from what we saw that no less than 102 LGS in 28 states of Nigeria will be heavily impacted by flood. In addition to that, 275 other local government areas cutting across the entire federation, that is inclusive of FCT, will suffer 1 degree of flooding or the other. Unfortunately, it has been progressing as we predicted, or quite unfortunately, because some remedial measures, steps are not taken by relevant authorities to ensure that things are put in order to avoid such a devastation. Maybe as we go further, like we mentioned, what are the updates? What has been happening so far has been that of flash flood, urban flooding, like what we saw in the clips there. Coastal flooding, like in the coastal areas like Lagos. The third arm is what made us to give that a red alert a few days ago. The issue of river flooding. Waters that are beyond Nigeria's control, gravitating down to Nigeria. So we have seen it, and it is moving speedily down to Nigeria. So we have to give that red alert a few days ago.
One would simply ask, would you say the warning signals was early enough, or it came too prompt?
It had been so previous years. So many things were affected by this COVID-19 lockdown, that the speed at which we wanted to go on air, we couldn't do it that way. But by the time we went on air, it was still early, because the rest were just trying to commence in some parts of Nigeria as early as in May. But before then, we have been using various media to say the message. As far as even February 4th, we were on air speaking that this is the right time to prepare. The best time to plan for war is during the time of peace. As far as flood is concerned, by February any year, no flood yet. So we began as early as February. But it was in May that the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, put out letters to all the governors in Nigeria, all the frontline ministers, like Minister of Environment, Minister of FCT, they were properly notified. Each of the state governors were given the names, the exact names of local government areas in their own states, that they should be watching out for flooding in 2020. So I would say we came out as early as possible to alert the nation of what we are seeing from our prediction.
Okay, let me go to DG, Nigerian Meteorological Agency. Most times when we hear Hydrological Services Agency, people think to just oppose as if they have almost similar functions. From your own perspective, would you say that the warnings you gave, the signals you gave were early enough?
Thank you very much for this question. You see, the rainfall of the country is structured in such a way that rains commence every year as early as January for some locations. Although with the change in climate now, effective date of commencement of rain is now beginning from March up to as far as even July for some locations. That is the extreme northern part of the country. So what we do in Nigerian Meteorological Agency is to ensure that as early as January every year, we release what we call the seasonal rainfall prediction for that particular year. The idea here now is, now that the prediction is released early in January, when we are expecting the rain used to start before the recent shift in the climate of the country, so which means people are given warning early enough. So we released the warning this year, precisely on the 23rd of January. There it was released by the Honorable Minister of Aviation, Senator Hadi Abubakar Sirika. So when the predictions were released, the minister was particular about one thing. He particularly said there is the need for downscaling of the prediction we have given to the level of states and the local governments. And by so doing, what the minister particularly appealed was that there is the need for authorities at the state and local government to put their heads together so that what we have produced will be downscaled, so that at the lowest level, meaning within the local government, we will know what exactly we are the predictions. So what we did immediately after releasing the prediction was to write all the 36 plus governors plus the SCT, telling them that in line with the request during the launching by the Honorable Minister, that the need for the Nigerian Meteorological Agency and the various states and the local government to put their heads together so that this information will be downscaled early and now people will know before the rain actually starts. Unfortunately, not much could be achieved because, like you all know, by 23rd of March, by middle of March, there was a problem which nobody actually expected. So, but that notwithstanding, what we did was we decided to make the best out of the worst situation by bringing in, using the alternative means of now communicating, of downscaling, that is using the online media now, so that through that way, through Zoom, for instance, and other methods, we have been able to reach out this downscaling to about 20 states so far, which is a good way, given the fact that this thing came suddenly. So in other words, what we are trying to say is, every year we release it in time and we make the appeals. Whether our appeals are heeded to, whether preparedness and other things are actually happening, these are issues which I believe that Nigerians all know, and during the course of our discussion today, these are issues that I believe will come up for discussion. But I'm happy my colleague from the Hydrological Services Agency made mention of some of these actual challenges there now, that these have been given out, so the expectation is that everybody should become prepared. So with the warnings that have been given, January about what the climate is likely to be, by May, what the situation of flooding is likely to be. I think Nigerians were well advised early enough. Whether they are heeded to the advice, that is another thing altogether, which I believe in the course of our discussion today, we are definitely going to look at them.
The next question I love to ask the two of you, because your functions are very, very similar, but you have your dividing line, is beginning with you. Do you have rural-based offices? Because most times we see the Hydrological Services Agency and the Nigerian Meteorological Agency as agencies that are supposed to be closest to the people, given the fact that farmers depend on you, a lot of persons depend on you to do their farming, the aviation depends on you to do a lot of things. Do you have rural-based offices?
What we do, currently we have 62 offices all over the country. Beside the state offices, in some states, we have up to 4, up to 5 stations. So what we try to do is we organize our activities within the state in conjunction, particularly with the main actors in the various sectors that are directly impacted by farming. We are not supposed to be everywhere, but our instruments are everywhere. In other, what we do, we enter into what we call partnerships with particularly educational institutions, with other institutions like agri-development projects, so that our instrument will be deployed and installed in a number of premises. As we are speaking now, we are present in over 200 educational institutions. When you look at that, we have 774. We are present in about 200 institutions, and we have our own offices where we have our instrumentation. 60-something. When you put, it means we are there. We are present in 1/3 of the 777 local government, which reasonably is a fair one. The expectation here now is, since we are there, either our instruments are there. When our instruments are there, we have officers manning the instrument, and which means interaction as expected within the locality where we have those our instrumentation. So that the idea here now is, we are seeing this is the trend that we are seeing. What do we do? So that at least the people that are there, through maybe the extension agent and others, they can be discussing with us. So what we do, our officers that are located in our offices are directly working with the extension agents and others within the state and the local government. Where we have our own offices, we enter into partnership with those, partner offices. We enter into understand the collaborative relationship. So that the idea here now is, when we have a station, for instance, in an educational institution or in agri-development project headquarters of a particular zone or state, the expectation here now is the officers that are there working are expected to interact maximally with our own officers that are manning our stations. So that the idea here now is, if there are advisory services on weather that are requested, attention of our officers can be provided, and our officers are already trained. And if there are issues that are beyond them, there are always levels by which it can be done so that they can get the information.
If I go to DG of when you talk about educational institutions, do you mean primary, post-primary, and tertiary?
What? All of them.
All of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Why? The idea here, is we are present, yes.
Let's get the perspective of the DG of Agribusiness Services Agency. Are you available across the country?
Hydrologically, Nigeria is divided into 8 hydrological areas, not based on political boundaries, but in terms of natural drainage system of Nigeria. Then we have 8 zonal offices. Each zonal office manning a hydrological area. At times, them could be up to 4 states or thereabout. And we have equipment measuring or gauging most of our major rivers in Nigeria, virtually all the major rivers in Nigeria. So the equipment are automatic that can give you, translate, data to you telemetrically without being to the site. But we have a lot of that are manual that people go there. So we have presence in several locations across the country. And any location we establish our equipment, we have a rapport with the community, the traditional or the local chiefs, for them to understand what we are doing there, which our staff must visit virtually every day. For instance, if I call Lokoja right away, the man will give me the information that what is happening in River Niger at Lokoja. Likewise, Makodi, Katsina, Ala rivers, a lot of them, Kebi. So we have offices in several locations. Our equipment are in different locations from where we gather information, data, on a real-time basis that enables us to do our forecast. But like as you said, we can't be everywhere. Okay. We are no spirits.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll come back to you for other perspectives. Now, I'm told the signals via Zoom joining the governor of Kebbi State, His Excellency Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, is through to us now. Your Excellency, good to have you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you. Good evening.
Well, we thought we were going to begin with you, but the challenge of signals challenged us. But quickly, maybe you need to update us on Nigerians. What has it been? Kebbi State has been in the news just like Sokoto and other states I cannot mention right now. What is the update like? And can you update Nigerians and what have you done so far to mitigate what is happening in Kebbi State in terms of flooding?
Thank you. It has been quite traumatic because the flooding is quite extensive. The River Rima crosses the state from the north to the south, where it joins River Niger, and it runs over 300 kilometers, and about 70% of it is now flooded, and the water is traveling downward to join to join the River Niger. The River Niger itself is flooded from Nigerian Republic to where it starts in Nigeria at Dole Kaina in Kebbi State, and all through to Kanji Dam, which is over 250 kilometers, is also flooding. But the weather agencies, the meteorological agencies have warned us earlier in the year, and because of that, there is less harm to human life and even minimal loss of animals. But the damage to crops is quite expensive because these are hundreds of thousands of hectares, mostly of rice, millet, and other crops. But many people have responded. Communities are supporting each other. Security agencies are helping. A lot of support from media agencies in broadcasting the challenges, and people have been avoiding danger zones. People have been evacuating from dangerous points. So it has been quite manageable in terms of risk to human life. The Commodity Association, particularly the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria, led by its president, has been on assessment tour together with Central Bank, together with NICEL and other institutions to see how extensive the damage is, and more importantly, what can be done immediately to begin to compensate for the loss of crops and support human life and support people who have lost their seedlings, their crops, with food and immediate support. And in addition to the two major rivers, there are pockets of flooding in other inland rivers, particularly at Jega local government, which has been significantly flooded as well, and Arewa local government. So these are not on the river bank, but they have also been flooded. There has been significant flooding. Yeah.
Okay, Your Excellency, thanks for the opening thoughts you have given us. So far, you have given us the perspective as a state government, besides the fact that the CBN and other weather agencies have been to assess the situation, the victims who are displaced, the farmers whose whose plant or crops have been washed away, do you have any plans for them, or are you doing something immediately for them while they await their maybe palliative or response from the Central Bank of Nigeria and other agencies?
Has been quite supportive in previous floodings, and even the sorry, I forgot to mention the National Emergency Management Agency has also been up and about assessing. But as you know, with flooding, two major issues are health concerns, because sometimes the waters even wash toilets the river supply. So the first thing is to ensure that people do not drink contaminated water, and people are able to use to cook any kind of water before they drink it to immediately stop any health diarrhea issues and health concerns. And then to provide food items and sometimes clothing items, blankets, mattresses to people whose homes have been flooded. And importantly also to begin to make available seedlings, to prepare seedlings and fertilizer, so that the moment the rivers, the water begin to recede, you will make seedlings available and other inputs so that farmers can replant again. Or fishing communities can also begin to open their farms or even fishing grounds.
Well, just before I let you go on this segment, naturally people will expect that with this development, the output will be affected in terms of produce during harvest, both the crops and fisheries, name it. Do you plan to utilize the dry farming season to show up this?
It has been a great year in terms of availability of rainfall. So there is a strong crop outlook for areas that are away from the riverbank, and that is comforting. And then maybe that is the same in most states. But as always, farmers have always been conscious that during the dry season, you have better control over the elements. Therefore, more yield is even recorded in the dry season. And certainly, with the support from both the federal government, development partners, Central Bank of Nigeria, NISA, and Commodity Association, there's already a lot of mobilization to ensure that we do the very best for the dry season and compensate for lost crops and even more than was being done in the previous years. And we must thank the federal government, the central bank, and other supporting agencies that have been supporting.
Okay. We'll go back to His Excellency as soon as the signals are perfected to update us on other issues. As we told you at the beginning, we have been joined from in Abuja, one of our Abuja studios, by Professor Hilary Inyang. Professor Hilary Inyang is a United States ambassador, distinguished scholar to Ethiopia, the Institute of Technology, Ethiopia. He is former chairman, U.S. National Advisory Council on Environmental Policy and Technology, NACEPT. Good to have you on the program tonight.
Very much, viewers, and thank you, presenter.
At the beginning of the program, we got the DG of Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency and the DG of the Nigerian Meteorological Agency to give us perspective to the developments and the warning signals they gave to Nigerians. And just joining us from Kebbi via Zoom is the governor of Kebbi State, who has given us perspective to what developments are there, what the federal government has done to mitigate the challenge, and also what the state government intends to do to ward off this. From a professional standpoint, what is your opening thought regarding flood alert in Nigeria and how to go about it?
Please, could you repeat the question, please?
From your professional standpoint, so far from developments across the country regarding flooding, what's your perspective?
As you know, floods are annual things, so they will always happen. So it's very important for the government to approach it very holistically so that losses that have been experienced over the years will stop. It is not possible to completely eliminate the losses, but then with good regulations, monitoring, and people keeping to standards on design and flood protection systems, it is possible to reduce all of these damages that have come to agriculture, that have come to human health, that have come to infrastructure and displacement of people. I also see that you don't have in Nigeria many research centers on floods. Not really floods alone, but all kinds of natural hazards. You should have the universities have a lot of this to generate data for planning purposes. And at the level of municipalities and the level of communities and states, there should be enforcement, better enforcement of rules on siting of facilities on floodplains and floodways. So there will always be precipitation, so you can't prevent that. It's something natural. But then there should be better defense against all of the damages that have been experienced.
Thank you so much. Now let's come to Nze Clement. DG, now with the developments now, are there plans maybe to do an upward review to surmount what is on ground already?
Upon review, like how?
You have sent a warning signal to Nigerians.
Yes.
Some states are affected.
Yes.
What should be done?
Like I mentioned earlier in the intro, Nigeria belongs to a basin of 9 countries called Niger Basin. Precariously, Nigeria is at the bottom of the basin. We monitor what happens upstream of the basin before we give our flood alert. As at on the 23rd of August, the flood level in Niamey, which is a reference point for us, was 6.6 meters high, which is already red alert. From 6.20 upwards is red alert. But what we saw today is that the level of the flood in Niamey has gone down to 6.50. However, within this period, a lot of water has been spilled from Kainji and Jeba dams. In fact, Jeba was spilling Kainji was spilling about 68 million cubic meters of water every day for over more than 2 weeks. And that's coming from Kainji has gone ahead to begin to flood communities downstream. And once Kainji begins to spill, Jeba, 100 kilometers downstream, must automatically follow. We are still watching the situation. We do real-time measurement or monitoring of whatever is happening upstream. We can't say that there may be downscaling or whatever, but we keep giving that information. Like, I'm happy that His Excellency mentioned it here. They got the information, which I believe what was said by the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adam, earlier in May, to all the state governors to inform them this is what is going to happen in the course of the year. And also the Professor Hillary, has mentioned it there too. So long as there is precipitation, we will continue to have flooding. But the main issue is how do we address it? How do we mitigate? How do we reduce the impact? Maybe in the course of our discussion, we can go into that.
Okay, absolutely. DJ, I'll come to you. Let me quickly go to Kebbi. Get the Excellency to explain one or two things, and I come to you on that. Your Excellency, in your opening thoughts, you told us that the state government had early warning signals from the weather agencies here. We have their DGs seated with me in the studio here. And despite this development happened in Kebbi. What word of advice do you have for your colleagues from other states of the Federation who may not have taken steps you have taken already in view of what you're going to right now in Kebbi State?
I think most will have taken steps. But just like Professor Ian said, precipitation is something that we pray for. But sometimes it's the balancing. You wish for rain to have a great crop, but unfortunately sometimes floods. And it is that balancing act that is a big issue. Of course, it can be mitigated by long-term capital-intensive support like dredging, but we are conscious about the enormity of the challenge. And in the interim, the major advice is to save human lives and to encourage people to take practical steps to stay healthy, to preserve infrastructure by supporting culverts, bridges, and infrastructure that is prone to damage from the flooding, and then support each other and provide replacement agents and input that will quickly support livelihood when water levels begin to recede.
Okay, thank you. We'll still come back to you in Benin Kebbi. Now, to the DG of NIMET, I want to address you through this tweet. A tweet has just come in here from Ukwoma Chukwuemeka. It says, I believe if government, especially the states, set up an environment-focused task force to help sensitize, enforce policies and laws among the people living in the regions likely to be affected by flood, will go a long way to mitigate its negative effects. How do you react to this?
Thank you very much. I think the issues raised are quite pertinent. They are apt. You see, the idea in flood is these days, because of the reality of devastations that are caused by flooding, the thinking of the world now is going beyond flood control to what is now called integrated flood management. The idea about integrated flood management is to carry out two major activities. Integrated flood management is about integration, and if you are integrating, there are two things you do. You integrate horizontally and you integrate vertically. In simple terms, what do you mean? When you are integrating horizontally, the multiple sectors that are very much interested in what happens on the floodplains, they need to be brought together. You have the land users, the farmers, those that are building on the land, the resident, those that are building, for instance, residential development. You have those that are actually working on the river systems, maybe the fishermen, and there are those that are waiting, that they want the flood to take place before they can survive. You know, these are multiple sectors. You need to bring them together, meaning that unless you bring them together, you can't make a progress. The other dimension is the vertical integration. When you say the vertical integration, meaning you go to the highest level to the lowest level of the decision making, meaning it's not just those that are governing, but even those that are being governed. So which means, in other words, before you can effectively manage flood, this integration will take place, the horizontal and then the vertical. And if you are talking about horizontal, for instance, it means the people at the highest level and those at the lowest level, they must understand each other. They must communicate with each other. They must agree with each other. They must decide together. So which means if this happens, it means the aspirations of everybody at different ladder of the society will always be considered. It will always be taken care of. So in that way, interest of one cannot jeopardize the interest of another one. What I'm saying is a very simple thing. For instance, population is expanding, and we need more land to build settlements, which means if the land is not there, the most vulnerable land on the floodplain will be encroached onto, which means the interest of those that are looking for the houses must be taken care of. And at the same time, the floodplains are supposed to be saved, because these floodplains, like you all know, they are naturally created in order to provide a simple function. The simple function is to sustain the ecosystem itself. The groundwater that we take from the well, substantial part of it actually results from flooding. Without flooding, there is no way water will percolate and accumulate in certain location. Without flooding, there is no way the land can become recharged. Without flooding, there is no way some fertile some fertility enhancing substances can be brought to the land to be cultivated. So in other words, the flooding itself is a blessing. Without flooding, there cannot be human beings. So what he is saying here now is, when people are brought together, everyone that matters, when he or she are brought together in the decision-making process, we are likely going to make much progress. One interest of the multiple sectors are also taken care of, meaning that the interest of one should not jeopardize that of another one. Okay. It means definitely we are going to make a huge success in the flood management.
Okay, DG Hydrological Services Agency, and that tweet here from Saleh Bala, it says, you have touched it briefly, but just for emphasis, what is the government doing to prevent or reduce the effects of flooding? Because awareness alone is not the solution. Structures need to be put in place.
Thank you for the question. And I would also say I'm delighted that His Excellency is here. When you talk about what the government is doing. Now, the Nigerian Hydrological Service Agency, NISA, is the upstream sector of issues with regards to flooding in Nigeria. Ours is to see it ahead of time, before it occurs. We do the prediction, and we make it available to the general public, and try to use every available means to cascade that information down. Now, there are levels of government. These are the federal level I'm talking about now. It comes to the state governments. What should they do? They are outlined there. Local government areas or councils, what should they do? What would they do? We've been advocating, we've been speaking, that government, especially at the state level, should have the political will to take some actions, remove structures that are within the pathways of flood. Don't allocate buildings or estates like what we see here in Abuja to people, estate developers, to go and build. Like what happened in Sunday Estate near Day. You will discover that the entire estate, more or less, was inside the floodplain. Somebody that has some money, they will allocate to him, they will say, 10 hectares of land. No drainage, just use ruler and biro, divide into plots and put beacons and say to people. Nobody has talked about where is the flood plain here. Where are the drainages? Of course, flood has no enemy, has no friend. Once it comes, it must find a way to pass. Most of these places, there are no drainages, there are no roads. What you see are buildings within these estates. Unlike where we are, in Garki, in Wuse, in Maitama, Asokoro, you can see that there were infrastructures first. Heavy drainages put in place before the buildings actually came in. You hardly see talk about the issue of flooding, apart from where the drainages are blocked. But in most of the estates we have in the hinterlands in Abuja, likewise other cities, there's no planning at all.
Okay, let's go to Professor Inyang. Professor Inyang, I will pass this question through a tweet to you. It's coming from a true Democrat. Unlike Egypt, where floods are blessings for irrigation and dry farming, the question is, why is Nigerian floods not controlled to be used for economic purposes? Example, construction of dams for power farming, generation, etc. How do you react to this?
As you know, Egypt is a country, the Middle East country, that has experienced water management problems for a very long time. Nigeria has been very lucky. Nigeria is a very well-drained country and has not had to do as much as Egypt or Israel or any of the Middle Eastern countries. Also Ethiopia, for example. So that's one reason that it has not reached the level of severity that you've had in those countries, water management issues. But in Nigeria as well, as my good friend, the professor, the director of NISA alluded to, is becoming a problem. at that level, at the national level, such agencies are very good, and they've done very well with alerting Nigerians to the prospects of floods and so forth. But much has to happen at the state level and at the local government levels, where there are statutes, local statutes on facility siting, where there are local waste management practices that silt up channels, waste dumping in many places that you shouldn't have. So a lot of things that need to be done have to be done at the retail level. Now, you're talking about dams. Dams, to do dams on flood path, you know, there's a lot of studies that have to be done. You just don't dam a place like that. There is micro-zonation that needs to be done with respect to prospective river channels. Floods don't always come on the same channel. So there's a lot of studies that have to be done to go from national zonation maps to state zonation maps to local government zonation maps before things like that can be done. Yes, they can be done. And probably the states and the local government will need help from the ecological fund as well, because some of those projects are those that would normally not be thought of as infrastructure development. There are more of preventive projects, and a lot of people tend to do more of the remedial than the preventive. So that's my viewpoint on that. Another opportunity to do dams and do all these kinds of infrastructure projects is the World Bank erosion control projects. Those projects are heavily funded and should be used in ways that are beneficial to flood control as well. For example, there's a lot of ecological damages from erosion in a lot of states. In fact, all the states of Nigeria, I cannot pick out any one that is exempt from that. So ecological funds will help in all of those kinds of things at the state level, and also the World Bank Erosion Control Project has elements that could be helpful in this regard.
Okay, let's go to Benin Kudu, where Governor Bagudu is, Kebi, please, where he's joining us from via Zoom. Your Excellency, I'm sure you want to react to what the DG of Hydrological Services Agency just said regarding what states should do in terms of land allocation and what have you, violation, which is in total violation of what the plan should be. But there's a tweet directed at you here. Let me take it. It's coming from Kiss2 for Real 123. It says, it is quite obvious that flooding is recurring almost every year. The question is, to His Excellency, sir, what long-term plans are governors and relevant stakeholders making to address the issue, especially as it relates to those at flood-prone areas? We'll come back to His Excellency as soon as the signals, the audio signal just dropped there. I'll quickly do that. Maybe, do we just chat on that while they fix that up?
Yes. You see, what the expectation here now is states are expected to particularly bear the burden, because states are serving as the link between the federal and the local. The local governments are located within them. Local government are relying on the state government to reach out to the federal. And the bulk of the people that are affected by flooding are at the level of the local government. So which means the state are actually at the center. So which means any coordinating activity involving coordination of the various people that are affected by flooding for decision making to take place, it is expected that the state will be at the forefront in doing that. So the expectation here now is that the state should not only see themselves as a sort of a middle link between the federal and the state government, but states should see themselves as the monitors. They should see themselves as the managers. They should also see themselves as the coordinators of flood management at the local level. So what essentially I'm trying to say here now is states needs to do more. When you look at what is happening now, if flood occurs, assessment of waters the damage, provision of relief to those that are affected, putting in place contingency measures to cater for those that are affected by flooding, to a large extent is vested on NEMA, meaning that even those states should have that responsibility. You will discover that the bulk of activity will now be pushed towards the National Emergency Management Agency. In other words, what needs to be done now is states should now see themselves as those that should mobilize resources that should support NEMA so that this kind of intervention and whatever can now be provided. At the same time, states should not be in a position to provide the necessary support, technical and material, to the local government, so that the local government can now be on their own, even without direct involvement of the state. The local government can handle flood management issues. That is why, if you look at the act establishing NEMA, there is state management agency and there is local government management committee. So meaning that if in every local government you have the management committee that is put in place, that is working effectively, I'm assuring you that whenever there are issues related to flood, before intervention of the state is even sought, let alone that of federal government, the local government will not be in a position to take care of the problem.
Okay, right on time. The signals from Benin Kiri have been restored, and we go back to the governor of Kebbi State. Your Excellency, you were about reacting when we lost signals. Can you react now?
Hello?
Your Excellency,
Hello?
the question basically was, besides the fact that you would love to react to what the DGs have said over here, a tweet came in from Kisto for Real 123, and the tweet is, it says it is quite obvious that flooding is reoccurring almost every year. And the question is to His Excellency, that's you, what long-term plans are governors, that is you and other governors and relevant stakeholders, making to address the issue, especially as it relates to those at flood-prone areas?
Is bad.
Quite a challenge there. I believe our engineers are working around to ensure that it is fixed. Well, quickly, let me ask this general question to you, the two DGs, and Professor Inyang. But let me go to Professor Inyang. Professor Inyang, what would have been responsible whenever there's flooding, and whether agencies like Hydrological Services Agency and maybe NIMET advise locals or the residents of a particular area to relocate? They find it difficult to do that. What advice will you give?
You know that these kinds of situations are not unique to Nigeria. There's flooding in many places in West Africa, everywhere basically, even United States, China. So they face the same problems. NIMET and these national agencies have done a good job. I have been following them for years. But they don't have flood management responsibilities. So it is at the state level that there should be enforcement. So their responsibility is to provide information, provide probabilities for floods of certain levels, and do some general or even some scientific assessments of things as they do, and they do that very well. But you see, it is at the state level there's got to be political will to have zonation maps and make sure that siting controls on facilities, practices by farmers, that at the local government level, certain detention areas for floodwaters are kept and not sold to the highest bidder. So there are some enforcement things that are better done at the state level. The government has the responsibility for protection of human health and for safeguarding the health of communities. So there are many legal frameworks that can be used to enforce and displace people who refuse to move. There are fines. They can be charged to court as people who violate local statutes. So that has to be done for the interest of the general public. Somebody who takes a piece of land that is very critical to drainage and occupies without authority should always be, have to have some penalties to pay. So you have incentives also. You can dislocate people to other pieces of land and get them to leave those that are vulnerable, and the public needs to use as easements, as flood channels, easements. Government typically does this in many countries.
Thank you so much. We'll be going to Benin Kuru, but after the first set of reports, and the first report is coming from Kogi. I understand the first report is not ready. Let's go to Kebbi, where I believe the signals have been restored, and His Excellency has been waiting to give us updates on the tweet we asked him about. Back to His Excellency. Your Excellency, you could respond now.
Long-term, thank you. I think the question was on long-term measures, and I started by saying that we need great collaboration between state and federal government, because if I take the example of Kebbi State have two upstream dams, Goronyo Dam in Zamfara State and Goronyo Dam in Sokoto State and Bakalori Dam in Zamfara State, and all these dams send water to Kebbi, which is downstream. And then we have the River Niger, which leads to Kanji Lake, Kanji Dam, which also is federal owned. So because we are dealing with dams that are at once controlled by the federal government, and then floodplains that are utilized by state government, collaboration is important. Secondly, management issues, particularly sand desilting and dredging, is also important in order to provide the maximum level of river depth that can hold water. But again, this must be collaborated. It's capital intensive. Secondly, it has sometimes it even has international dimension, because the River Niger, for example, comes from Guinea through Mali, through Niger, then through Kebbi border into Nigeria. So some of the issues involve considerations about what other countries are doing, or what would be of common interest to all. And in addition, the localized water storage or water management issues also have a lot of environmental impact on other states that is not immediately obvious. And without environmental impact assessment, what will be expedient for one state might be a problem for another state.
Okay, Excellency, we'll come back to you. We have a couple of reports in the course of the program, and our first report tonight is coming from Lokoja.
Brings back unfortunate lingering memories of the devastation caused by flood since the 2012 disaster. They have refused to leave because they say they do not get the adequate care and support by the authorities when relocated to IDP camps. This is in addition to their claims of dire consequences if they leave their ancestral homes. I am standing at Ohono Riverbank, a community in Kogi local government area, and if you look across the river there are more than 50 communities according to the community leaders here. NIMET, in its yearly weather reports, predicted that 22 states, including Kogi, will be flooded, but despite this forecast, the constant agony of losing farmlands, buildings, and even loss of lives, many riverine communities have refused to heed warnings.
If we come out there, nothing will chop again. Cannot go leave our community, go another place.
With September, the usual month of flooding in Kogi, clear water channels, leave your homes, relocate to higher grounds, and prepare groups of local rescuers just in case flood occurs are some of the messages as NEMA and the Kogi State Emergency Management Agency embark on the 2020 flood preparedness, mitigation, and response sensitization campaign for flood-prone communities in Sarikinoma, Galilee, Adankolo, and Ganaja in Lokoja local government, Ohono, Koto, and Grinya in Kogi local government area.
The main thrust of this is so that they are aware. Once they are aware of what to do in the event of flood, you are able to save yourself, you are able to save your family, you are also able to save your property and invariably the community.
Those of us that are farming on the waterways, it is better you start harvesting. If there's need to harvest, you start harvesting and move clear to higher ground.
Omala, Ibaji, Ida, Basa, Igalamela Odalu, Ajakuta, and Dekina that are worst hit by flood are also expected to be sensitized and action plans developed to mitigate the effect of flood should it occur.
Our next report takes us back to Kebbi.
From DK Naugi local government area through Nasini and Argungu to the Queen Brennan Kebbi local government, Koifa and Tuga and Sura and Bagudo local governments respectively, down to Kebbi Niger state border through Shanga, Yaura and Ngaski local government areas, flood water submerged thousands of rice farms. The tragedy also struck other crops such as millet, sorghum and vegetables, destroying what farmers labored on from the beginning of the season.
We were here on Thursday. There was no water here. The speed at which the water is moving is quite remarkable.
Behind me are hundreds of rice farms submerged by water in the Kufadama area of Birnin Kebbi local government area of Kebbi State. On a good day, hundreds of farmers are seen here working on their farms throughout the day, but they have now left their farms for the August visitor. The farmers, most of whom access loans and other facilities from both public and private institutions to cultivate these crops, describe the incidents as devastating.
The loss certainly is going to affect the nation because if you look at the amount of food crops that have been produced or that would have been produced from this season, certainly it is not something that will be consumed in its entirety in the state. It will certainly go down to different parts of the country.
Meanwhile, a team from the National Emergency Management Agency has visited some of the affected areas to assess the level of devastation for intervention.
We have a lot of displaced persons. All the rice farms are also submerged.
It's as if we have been told earlier. However, sometimes one of the challenges is when you say people should relocate. Have they been given alternative places to relocate to? Those are some of the things we encourage our stakeholders to look into.
From Kebbi, we go to Lafia in Nasarawa State.
Like many other states, especially on the Benue Trough, Nasarawa is blessed with many water bodies. However, The seasonal overflows of these water bodies and the topography of the area make the state susceptible to seasonal flooding and consequent loss of properties and sources of livelihood like houses, property, and farmlands. This has necessitated lots of education and sensitization of residents to be environmentally friendly to avert the impending danger.
Whenever rain falls, we used to miss road and enter our premises. We are trying making our effort of cleaning the areas. But the problem we are having here is that sometimes in the night, people will be packing their refuges and be dumping it inside the waterways.
Though yet to reach this peak period, the month of August has seen Lafia, the Nasarawa state capital, and a few local government areas already witnessing high level of flooding with devastating consequences.
The executive governor of Nasarawa state, through this warning, has directed the ministry to take assessment on the spot assessment of all the flooding areas and also to look at our river banks, whether they have the ability to withstand the flood. We've gone around, we've taken assessment of all the flood, possibly flood-prone areas. We have aggregated them.
We have no less than 44 trucks of assorted grains in the store. We had a few mattresses, a few rainy items in the event which we will distribute to all these people.
It could be recalled that in its 2020 annual flood outlook for the country, the Nigeria Hydrological Agency had given the likelihood of high flooding similarly to the ones experienced in previous years.
One of the key questions we asked at the opening of the program is it that public awareness tools are not very effective? We'll pass these questions to the two DGs here, but after we return from Benin Kebbi, where I would love His Excellency to react to this situation. One of the respondents from Kogi State, that is Lokoja, had talked about the fact that, if I quote him, he said, if we come out here, which will go chop? Meaning, if a place is flood prone and I reside there, if you relocate me, is it possible? Are you having problems with those who are residing in flood prone areas? What plans do you have for them to relocate?
Obligation of government is to ensure public safety and safety of human lives. And therefore, the emphasis is for people to relocate to safer ground. Relocating to safer ground does not stop them from pursuing livelihoods in the flood plain. Maybe they can plant, they can do fishing there, they can take animals to rear. But obviously, we don't want them to live in places where flooding can potentially destroy their homes and or cause death or harm to themselves. So, most in Kebbi State, and thank God that's why we are experiencing low number of deaths, even though the flood is devastating. In previous years, flood that is not as devastating as this has cost more lives. But because people have been heeding to warnings and relocating to higher ground, the loss to human life has been minimal. So the first thing is safety. Safety.
For the farmers and the people in the agricultural sector, flood helps them in the long run by providing nutrients to the soil that were lacking. Yet, if the wells are flooded, the well will be contaminated. So what is the government doing in order to ensure the health of the people?
In terms of warning people not to drink contaminated water, to cook water, especially during the flood season, and also to know that the animal can also be affected and move them to safer ground. The farming activity is always something you can compensate for. For example, in the flooding of 2018, the federal government supported the 14 states that are affected by flooding with about 23 billion naira, with seedlings, with food, and most of it was recovered down. Yes, nutrients can also enhance the soil quality following from a flood, and to take advantage of it, states have to be ready to support farmers with seedlings immediately when water levels begin to recede, so that they can compensate for the crop.
Okay, well, back to you, Your Excellency. Now, I asked a general question, which I'll leave to the two of you, DG Hydrological Services Agency and DG NIMET, to react to. What really is the public enlightenment tool in place to ensure that people are adequately and convincingly conscientized ahead of developments like this?
Okay, for us in the Hydrological Service Agency, we do our publicity at different levels. The first one is the public presentation by the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adam. So he does it. I think this is the fifth one he has done since he became our Minister in Water Resources. Stakeholders are invited from different locations, from the state government and the international community that are relevant to what we do. They are invited. The documents are made available to everybody. That is the first leg of it, of our publicity. Try to publicize what we are saying, issue of flooding. Then we begin to move from zone to zone. We also translate what we have predicted into the three major languages. We get to states, bring some states together in a zone, and then enlighten them, the state SEMAs, Minister of Water Resources, Environment in the states, CSOs that are equally involved. Mind you, we also have our officers, zonal offices, that equally have the materials, and they are on their own also liaise with the relevant states in their own locations. We use various social media handles to publicize what we do. A lot of press releases to update people. We liaise with NOA. They are part and parcel of what we do in terms of publicity, because they have offices virtually in all the 770 political areas in Nigeria. And then like NTA, the radio stations, we work with them. So we do as much as we can, but we can't be everywhere. The state governments have access to the rural communities based on our predictions, which are always made available to the state governments. They can take it up from there too, and begin just as they normally do the campaign during the elections. They can even adopt that method, like we are talking about this issue of COVID-19. While doing campaign, trying to inform people on what the dangers of, things they must pay heed to. The issue of flooding should be integrated in what they are doing, as they are warning the people on how to heed the regulations with regard to COVID-19. The issue of flooding should be there too. There's one director of NOA in the States, I will mention the name. Why advertising, publicizing the issue of COVID-19 how people should take necessary measures. They go along also to inform the people about flooding in the localities. So we do the much we can from our own end, and then also expect that the state government should equally take it up from there to the rural communities.
Okay. We'll take a break now. When we return, more explanations from the DG of NIMET and Professor Hilary Ian. Stay with us.
For now, the best and most efficient way to avoid getting infected is through regular hygienic and sanitary practices, as well as social distancing. As individuals, we remain the greatest weapon to fight this pandemic. By washing our hands regularly with clean water and soap, disinfecting frequently used surfaces and areas, coughing into a tissue or elbow, and strictly adhering to infection prevention control measures in health facilities, we can contain this virus.
Coronavirus is real. Steps to avoid this pandemic. Wash your hands regularly or sanitize your hands. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Stay at home unless absolutely necessary. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth if your hands are not clean. Avoid the spread of coronavirus. Coronavirus is real.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying tuned. And before we succeed the next round of questions, let's take two reports, beginning from Anambra.
Flooding has become a global issue, with many countries, including Nigeria, experiencing unbelievable magnitude of flood disaster. In Anambra State, one of the states on the bank of the River Niger, flood menace has become an annual occurrence. Coastal communities covering Ayamelum, Anambra East and West, Obaru, Ihiala, Oka North, Onitsha North and South are perennially submerged by torrential flooding, washing away the fishing communities and large farmlands, which constitute the food basket of the state. Still fresh in mind is the 2012 induced flood crisis, which ravaged lives, rendering many homeless, paralyzing economic activities in these communities.
It is an experience that is very disturbing. When this kind of warning is given, it creates a tension in people's mind.
This flooding comes from through the rivers to the farm areas. So it is not steady at Achale anyway. It comes from other communities.
We are not praying for such a thing to happen again. With this flood that is coming, that means Oka North is in danger. So we don't know where to run for.
With warnings that another round of seasonal flood will sweep through the country in September and October, affecting many states, especially those in the coastal belt.
The essence of sensitizing people is to let them know that flood may come. Therefore, they should get prepared to relocate to higher grounds. That is a way of avoiding loss of life and properties. Preparing them in advance about what is likely to happen.
Necessary machinery has also been put in place to accommodate likely victims of the impending flood disaster at holding centers where they will be provided succor by government. Aside steps being taken by the state government to mitigate any likely impact of the flood, the citizens also have a crucial role to play by taking all precautionary measures and ensuring that their drainages are properly cleared to minimize the effect of the looming flood.
Our next report is coming from Kaduna.
For many years now, some local government areas of Kaduna State have been experiencing flooding, resulting in loss of lives and property. This assessment visit by the officials of the State Emergency Agency to some flood-prone areas in the metropolis is to enable them educate people on the need to avoid building on waterways and clearing of drainages to prevent flooding.
Yeah, this is a foundation that somebody intended to build very close to the river. It's very wrong. Unless if they are going to do dry season building, you stay during dry season. When the rain comes, you move to another place. So it's totally wrong, unacceptable by Kaduna State government.
4 local government areas, according to the 2020 NIMET prediction, may experience flooding this year in the state. They are Kaduna North, Chukun, Zaria, and Kaura. Jerry Lame has been living in one of the flood-prone areas for more than 10 years.
During rainy season, my major problem first is because of this drainage. And the drainage, people at night, some will come with their vehicle to dump something on this river. They will say that it's a river. Who asked me to come and build there? I've fought with so many people who asked me to come and build a house here.
These people that stays around, building house around the riverside, they should just try and maybe stay off the riverside, because immediately there is flood, it will definitely affect them.
There are some canal that channels to the river. When the river filled up, so the water have to come back to the canal. That is when it's affecting us here.
We like the area. We do business around this place. If we should relocate from this place, our business will be difficult for us, because we've been here for a long time now, chasing 20-something years now.
As water level in River Kaduna rises by the day, residents of flood-prone areas are expected to relocate to safer grounds.
The reports from Anambra and Kaduna sustaining the conversation. Quickly, we're looking at the perspective of enlightenment of the people. So can you sustain that from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, Nigerian Meteorological Services Agency, we are like 1 as 5 as 6. We work together. And in most cases, when it comes to the issue of reaching out, we virtually employ similar mechanisms of reaching out to the people. That is, using relying on the print, electronic media, contact with the community and other things. One other important avenue we utilize is partnership with the development practitioners. You see, in recent times, because of the challenge the climate change has been causing, development partners are now directing their attention rightly towards climate change mitigation. So in other words, they give much emphasis on that in their activities. WHO, for instance, are very much interested. How has the climate changes in the climate, how has it been accelerating the incidences of a number of diseases, for instance? And then the IFAD, International Fund for Agricultural Development, which is an arm of the FAO, for instance, an important aspect of things they do is on climate change and agribusiness, meaning what are the opportunities for business in agriculture that is being affected by climate change. So in other words, an important thing we now try to do, we partner with them. A number of our downscaling activities we do of our seasonal climate prediction, we do it for farmers in particular. We do it hand in hand with the effort. For instance, in 2019, through effort, we were able to downscale the seasonal rainfall prediction to farmers in 32 out of the 36 states of the country. The idea here now, we are now trying to say here now is the flooding, to start with now, even before the change in climate, flooding is something that nothing we can do. We just have to live with it because it's part of the nature. Flooding is needed. Changes in the climate has now resulted into serious changes in the pattern of the rain, resulting into reception of high amount of rain at a particular time, leading to incidences of the flooding. So which means since we cannot prevent flood from occurring, and climate has now changed their pattern of precipitation in favor of higher amount of rain, then it means receiving high amount of rainfall, receiving high amount of flooding is an issue we must learn to live with. So we need to communicate to the people, but the best thing we should do in reaching out is to communicate to the people the positive aspect of flooding. You see, when we keep on emphasizing that flooding is a disaster, only the negative aspect of the flooding. So therefore, as soon as flooding occurs, we should try to see how we can avoid it, try to see how we can run away. That is not the best way we can do. But let's come up with practices that people can bring. I'm happy when the governor was talking, His Excellency and the governor of Kebbi State was saying that even when flooding occurs, people can derive some opportunities out of the flooding. So therefore, when you have a mechanism like this, that you are now evolving some practices that will make the people to derive benefit out of flooding. Well, I want to assure you that the interest that people are showing on the prediction that people are making, they will try to show more interest in them. Since if you can successfully prove to them that when flooding comes, there are positive benefits you can drive away from it. So which means people will not be interested in when is the flooding coming. Rather than running out from the flood, people will try and see how can they move closer to the flooding. So this is a scenario that I think if we can now evolve it in our flood management mechanism, we'll now be able to start witnessing positive changes on the life of the people.
Now, Professor Inyang, before I go to Kebbi, quickly through these tweets. The tweet is coming from Kisto for Real 123. I want to suggest to government should prioritize the issue of climate change, which has been proven to be one of the cause of extreme weather conditions like rain, which will eventually result to flooding. If from this perspective you are asked to speak to Nigerians towards working hand in sync with government agencies to assuage flooding, both positives and negatives, what will you tell us?
I would say that Nigerians should watch out, number one, for more incidences of flooding, because as alluded to by the director of NIMET, I believe, climate change has come to stay. It is concentrating in Nigeria, more precipitation over shorter time intervals. What that means is that you have a lot of water for drainage. So flooding has come to stay. Now, we can look at it in terms of mitigation as well as adaptation. And the last gentleman who just spoke, I'm happy he's talking more about adaptation. The recognition that flooding will always be there. It has been there from time immemorial, but we have to do something to reduce its negative impacts. Number one, the public has to be aware of areas in their communities that are flood prone in terms of locations. Now, the public will not generally be aware of that unless each state has zonation maps. Zonation maps will say that this area is prone to seasonal flooding, the other one not so much, and so forth. So you need to have maps that would serve as guides to the local government agencies or even the state agencies that are responsible for granting permits for siting of facilities, for granting permits for building structures and so forth. So that's one. Each state has to struggle to do that. Second, there are many engineering measures for reducing the impacts of floods or even preventing some degree of flooding. You can't completely deal with all kinds of flooding by design, but you can reduce the impacts. For example, there should be some interception ponds for drainage water in many, many states. I mean, if there is seasonal flooding, the patterns will be known, and they should be detention ponds in many communities in Nigeria. Another one is that you have under design in many states and locations. If you are designing for a 100-year flood, we are designing for a 25-year flood, we are designing for a 40-year flood. Who are the monitors? Have people been monitoring that indeed these facilities, culverts, many other types of drainage structures are designed according to accepted standards? So yes, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of jurisdictions have roles to play. Even the general public. How do they deal with the issue of waste management? Do they dump waste on locations that they shouldn't be? When they see culverts that are open, when they see gutters that are open, what is the community's response? So non-profit organizations that also deal with the public interest should be watch out for this too. But also at the level of providing data for management of these things. There are state universities. Which of the state universities have disaster management research centers that would complement NIMET and a few other national agencies that are doing something here? We know that floods are the most frequent natural hazards in Nigeria. So there should be lots of programs in these universities and research centers and management centers to offer help to local governments and state governments.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Kebbi before we come to the last line of reports. Your Excellency, judging from the last contributions by the team of panelists tonight, would you think, or don't you think we should be thinking towards a nationally determined goals on flooding?
It has always been on the table because the various agencies of the federal government, the meteorological agencies, the emergency agencies both in the state and the national, have been very active in determining what a national plan will be. And the federal government, Federal Ministry of Water Resources has been active. It has been seeking support for funding from development partners to evolve a national plan, because the national plan is both long-term and capital intensive. We may recall that when President Muhammadu Buhari was chairman of the Petroleum Trust Fund, he initiated the dredging of River Niger, which is a long-term plan which can provide succor and will be a key ingredient of a national plan. And I'm sure the same thing with initiatives on Lake Chad, to recharge Lake Chad so that it will hold more water and it will reduce flooding around the tributary rivers. So these are capital long-term initiatives which are still on the table. And I believe with increased funding or increased mobilization of resources, we will begin to see them being implemented, because certainly they make sense. I mean, Kebbi State can easily absorb billions of dollars of investment, which will be justifiable and will pay back, because it will provide more certainty and control over water utilization, which will help produce more. And so certainly, yes, there is the great desire for a national plan to be enhanced. Thank you.
Okay, yes, we'll be back to you for your concluding thoughts. But quickly, let's take our last line of reports, which is by way of Vox Pop, and we'll begin with Benin.
Before well, about 2-3 hours, once it rain well, water the entire each house.
I beg government to make the help us. So look at Sudan as now. People not there again. The other house, people not there. Even this is safe. People, many house, people don't recommend because of this.
Where the water they come from New Market, then St. Paul from the QSA, they come here. Then what will they beg for now? Make government can do for us. Because see where they save us for here now. That very place when they open now, and there water they pass, they go in the backyard. But because of say they won't block that place, that's why you say I do this one and make water not come enter here.
We are soliciting for the government to come to our aid, to come and clear the gutters.
We need government intervention so that they will help us to do the road. So if you watch now, to who enter the no vehicle coming, no one going out.
The global factor. We know we hear of the climate change occasioned by global warming. That is one of the factors that is causing excessive rainfall. The drainages have been blocked because of human factor. Our people are not oriented enough to understand that once you block these drainages, you will be the person to suffer it at the consequence. And for one of the things you are saying now is you have a drainage by the sidewalk, but the water is not draining because they've been blocked by the activities of the people living within the environment.
Next Vox Pop is coming from Port Harcourt, Rivers State.
In their building because of flood. The crops we have is almost gone, so we don't have anything to get from the land this year.
Anytime rainy season, nobody can stay here because of the flood. Our property are inside that house.
Last flood experience in Rivers State, we observed that so many communities in Andoni was affected, and we didn't see government intervention. So for me, I want to advise our people should be properly prepared so that when it comes, it doesn't take us unaware. At least we should find a way out.
Based on previous experiences, we should be able to estimate these are the number of people that will be affected, that will be evacuated from those locations. They should let there be camp, where people can take refuge.
Emergency response or emergency preparedness is not meant for federal government agencies alone. It's meant for everybody, particularly the communities that are affected. They have to do their part.
Enugu is our next stop.
Then we will notice that Enugu is not prone to flooding. We usually take proactive measures in Enugu State. Before any rainy season, we'll move around to make sure that we desert all the public drainages so that when there is rain, people will not experience incidents of flooding in any part of Enugu.
I think the best way is for us to clear all our waterways. We should make sure the drainage channels are clear. And then we should make sure we plant trees that will help to stop flooding. It can destroy our houses, can as well destroy our crops. There are a lot of deforestation. People are killing plants.
Some build houses on drainages and places where they are not supposed to build houses. And indiscriminate dumping of waste. It leads to loss of economic crops, goods, even loss of life. And it can equally lead to destruction of infrastructure.
In the concluding segment of the program, we'll begin from Benin, Kebbi, back to Abuja. But quickly, most often, one would liken flooding to the hot stove theory. You own the stove, you own it, it burns you if you don't manage it very well. If you don't manage flood very well, either you use it positively or it will ravage your environment. Your Excellency, from all the discussions, it is very clear that we need flooding to even plant crops. But if we don't manage it well, it will ravage our environment. By way of conclusion, what are your concluding thoughts?
Thank you for that. And like I said, and I think Professor Hilliard said that, Hillary said it better, humanity has always been with flooding. in the Bible, in the Quran, in the Torah, there's always been stories of flooding, and certainly is something that we all wish for. Only that we wish we can always have it in manageable way. Occasionally, population pressure and property rights are impacting on the aggression with which we live in areas where we should not be living. But we'll continue to draw attention to better and safer places to live and managerial issues that will reduce blockages and the wider environmental and climate change issues, planting trees, dredging that can make the rivers contain more water at any one time, and then the balancing act. But overall, we have not done very badly. Our circumstance compared to other countries is much better. But of course, we pray that we will be able to mobilize the kind of funding that will enable us do more, so that we'll manage the water resources better with less flooding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, Governor of Kebbi State, for making time to be on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you so much. Now, go to Professor Hilary Inyang. Professor Hilary Inyang, could you profile some solutions before we wrap up the program tonight, as your concluding thoughts?
I'm very grateful to you and my co-panelists and the listeners. I think Nigeria needs to respond at various jurisdictional levels, at the national level, at the state level, and at the local government and local levels to this threat of flooding, because it will continue. As Governor Bagudu has also mentioned, flooding is not necessarily bad, but when it comes at levels that are excessive, that's where there needs to be some intervention. In my own opinion, there's got to be some level of enforcement of existing statutes and creation of new ones on the bad occupancy of flood-prone areas and drainage channels. That's one of the biggest threats in many cities in Nigeria with respect to flooding that has caused a lot of problems. The other one is that there's got to be strengthening of units at the state level that are responsible for granting permits to developers. That's a very major sector that could do the country good with respect to control of flooding. The other one is that there are many engineering measures that have been adopted in many places that could reduce the problem. The Nigerian Society of Professional Engineers should get engaged in that, and the state should develop partnerships with such entities to try to bring fraud control designs to bear on a lot of public works projects. And finally, being that my co-panelists have talked about other equally important measures, there is the issue of generation of data. There are many research institutes that should be established in Nigeria to help in these kinds of things. But unfortunately, there are very few. There are just too few of them. If you would have such centers that provide help to local governments, especially at the state universities and polytechnics, a lot could be done to control floods in Nigeria.
Professor Hilary Young, it was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight. Okay. Now, before we take the COVID-19 update, there's a quick one here coming from former DG of NIMED, Dr. Anthony Onoforum. Quite a strong point. He says, the point that flooding and other extreme weather events will persist in years to come is very well made and should be re-emphasized. Adaptation is therefore critical to survival. I strongly suggest that the process of operationalizing the national framework for climate services in Nigeria should be concluded. This will help to achieve the integration the DG NIMED made reference to earlier. That's a contribution from Dr. Anthony from his, I think it's the former DG of NIMED where
Yes,
he
exactly.
succeeded.
Yes, exactly.
And quickly, before we go to the two DGs with me here, the latest coming from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control on COVID-19 says, it shows that Nigeria has recorded 239 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Out of the number, Plateau State tops the list with 116 cases, followed by FCT with 33 cases. Lagos has 19, Ekiti 12, Kaduna 11 cases, while Bauchi recorded the list with 1 case. This brings the total number of confirmed cases to 54,247. 42,010 has been discharged, while 1,023 deaths recorded. That's the update on COVID-19 from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. Maybe I have to take on Professor Mashi. Do you want to re-emphasize what Dr. Anthony said?
Certainly, yes. You see, the United Nations agency saddled with the responsibility of managing issues related to weather and water and climate, which is WMO, has for long come to a conclusion that the best way we can enhance adaptation at national level is to ensure that every country should put in place what is called a framework, national framework for climate services. This is like, when you say a framework, it's like a structural arrangement of a number of components, a number of individuals, a number of parties, a number of structures within the country that will now come together with defined roles, with defined responsibilities, with defined actions that everyone is supposed to play in order to ensure that issues related to climate, whether it is generation of the information, analysis of the information, utilization of the information, or whatever you have related to that information, in order to stimulate development, is actually strengthened. So in Nigeria, what we have done, we have produced a framework, and it has already been approved by the Federal Executive Council, but because there are some important issues in implementing the framework that need to be strengthened related to, for instance, mobilization of resources. Different sectors need to make sectoral contribution. So, like, you know, issues of money is very, very fundamental. That is why it is still being sharpened. So what Dr. Anufaram is emphasizing is the earlier we start operationalizing this framework, the better. Okay. What is essentially will be achieved is by the time the framework start coming together, then it means me, you, and any other one that has a role to play in enhancing climate change adaptation will already know the contribution you are to make, the contribution I'm to make, what is expected from you, and what you are expecting from each other. So meaning that in such a way that it means the issue of climate change adaptation will become everybody's business. Okay. So when this is
I just needed to amplify that because it was quite emphatic.
Very, very easy.
Now let me go to DG,
yes.
the Geological Services Agency. Now, this whole thing centers around you because we're talking about flooding in Nigeria. And yes. The lesson is that we got to know today that flooding has its positives and negatives. Yes. If you manage it well, you get the positives. If you don't manage, like Governor of Kebbi State said, even within flooding, you should pick opportunities out of it. Quite an eye-opener there. So what are your concluding thoughts in all this to Nigerians before I go to DG NIMED?
I mentioned 2 issues there, 2 points. Well, from what His Excellency has said, the Governor of Kebbi State, you could see that several billions are going in there now, either to rehabilitate people, to compensate people, to build houses, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to prevention, data acquisition, like Professor Hillary mentioned, data, which are necessary for forecast, for prediction, you will see that it's almost in near zero allocation to do that. So I'm using this medium to call on government at whatever level to see the need to fund hydrological activities. It is very key. So many, this is just one state you have mentioned here, only KB states have been mentioned. Then talk about others, let them come up with their own details. You will see it will be running to trillions. Damages caused by flooding. But the upstream sector, where the prediction is done, is not being perfected or being funded properly. So that's the one point I want to make. The second point and the last is, Professor Hillary mentioned something like Nigeria is one of the countries in the world that is best drainage system, the river Niger system. Now this is like a gold passing through our territories, water. Go to other countries of the world. In fact, I don't know whether Ethiopia, in fact, Egypt wanted to go to war against Ethiopia because Ethiopia is damming River Nile. And between Ethiopia and Egypt, you have Sudan. Why should we put that grand Ethiopian Renaissance dam? Egypt wanted to go to war because of water. Now, what we are advocating is this. State governments should not allow such a gold to pass through their territories and west in the Atlantic Ocean. From rivers Niger and Benue, every year, the contribution is about 62 billion cubic meters of fresh water coming from outside combination. But by the time it is entering the Atlantic Ocean, you have over 200 billion cubic meters of fresh water annually. What are the states doing? Can they detain this water? Can they build diversion structures wherein they can detain this water passing through their territories for year-round integrated agriculture? I have been at several fora internationally where within the West and Central Africa, we are arguing about water. We are downstream. My colleagues from other countries, Niger, Mali, Cameroon, we ask, the ones you are getting, what are you doing with it? Because we talk about the threshold. Guinea, don't take more than 25% of the water so that the rest will come to Mali. Mali, if it comes to your own, don't take more than 25% before it comes to Niger. Okay. We were saying 5%. Nigeria was arguing for 5%. Then they asked Nigeria, the one that is coming, what are you doing with it? You allow it because this is international community. We know whatever is happening within the Niger Basin. You allow this to waste into the Atlantic Ocean and you say we shouldn't take more. We will take more than that. So at a point in time, 2014, they said it must be 25% minimum they will take. So governors, please arrest this water passing through their territory. Create communities, build structures, and detain this water for year-round irrigated agriculture, recharge the aquifer, cool the environment like what we have in Jabi Lake. Thank you very much.
Your perspective?
Like I said at the beginning, what is needed is integrated flood management. Integrated in the sense that water, the land, and the climate, they need to be integrated together so as to ensure that the economic benefits of the flooding in particular and the economic losses of flooding are always taken into account in whatever decision we are taking. Once if we can do this, like I said at the beginning, let's have the integration both along the vertical and the horizontal. Horizontal, the various sectors that are you making use of the water on the floodplain. Bring them together, take care of their interests, make them to be working together so that one activity of one sector will not compromise the activity of another sector. When you do go vertically, decision making from the highest to the lowest level as far as flood management is concerned will not be done in an integrated manner. You know, when you put a structure like this, the expectation is that we will now be in a better position to know what the flooding are, what the benefits are, what the consequences are, what exactly are we supposed to do, what is the responsibility of every stakeholder so as to be able to manage the flood effectively. So my message is everybody needs to come together. Don't leave the responsibility to anyone.
Thank you so much, Professor Sani Abubakar, Director General, CEO, Nigerian Meteorological Agency. It was nice having you on Tuesday Live tonight.
Thank you.
And Nze Clement, Director General, Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That's it on Tuesday Live tonight. We looked at 2020 flood alert. Thanks for your tweets and your concerns. On behalf of all of us,